When Bryce Losky first met Julie Baker, both were only 7 years old. In the beginning of the story, Bryce and his family are moving to a new neighborhood. This is when Julie first lays her eyes upon Bryce, and this simple coincidence fuels a tale full of avoidance and terrible social discomfort for Bryce. Julie runs across the road to help Bryce and his father, Stephen, move some stuff out of the van. She simply jumps inside the van and offers her help. Immediately, it gets awfully crawled, and both Bryce and Stephen start their futile attempts to make her leave. Julie, however, refuses to take the hint until Stephen sends Bryce to help his mother with the thing. Bryce, happy that finally his father came up with an original and powerful plan, jumps out of the van and starts running, totally unaware that Julie will come after him and try to stop him. Bryce stumbles and suddenly realizes that he's holding hands with this strange girl. His mother comes out then, and he refers to the only skill that could be available to a boy his age, running to his mother and hiding behind her back. Unfortunately, this will not be the end of his embarrassment. First day at the school, he realizes that Julie is in his class, and she is just as enthusiastic about him as before. As soon as she sees him enter the class, she plunges forward and embraces him firmly, starting a snowball of childish teasing and gossip that will last for years. In 6th grade, however, Bryce finally comes up with an idea. He asks out a girl named Sherry, whom Julie particularly hates, and walks around with her in school, hoping that Julie will notice and leave him alone. The plan doesn't work out as intended, though. Bryce's best friend suddenly falls in love with Sherry and, in betrayal of his friend, tells her about everything. In the end, all Bryce receives is a good slap on the face and even more attention from Julie, who, for some reason, now goes as far as sniffing his ears from his back. On the opposite side of the coin, however, this story looks completely different. From Julie's perspective, this is how everything began. She is playing in front of his house when a new family arrives in her neighborhood, and she sees those dazzling eyes of the newcomer. Immediately, taken by a sudden tide of some powerful emotion, she runs towards their van and offers her help. The boy, however, is sent by his father, and just before he is imprisoned in his home for good, she wants to give him a chance to play a little. This is why she runs after him in an attempt to stop him. And then it happens. They are holding hands, and Julie sees a glimpse of love in his eyes. Unfortunately, his mother arrives before they can kiss, so Julie is left with her dreams about the kiss that could have been. The fact that Bryce has feelings is clear to Julie, but throughout the next few days, she realizes how shy he is and decides to help him out. She gives him enough opportunities to finally express his love, until, by the 6th grade, she learns how to control herself. A mild inconvenience happens then. A girl named Sherry, a gossipy, backstabbing girl, starts a relationship with Bryce. For a while, Julie is forced to endure the sight of them walking around the school, but finally, the relationship ends as she expected. Bryce sees that a girl like Sherry isn't fit for him, and the two break up. This is when she first encounters that smell in his hair, the watermelon smell that she will secretly feel for the whole year to come. As we can see, perspective is everything. Here, we get back into Bryce's head and continue seeing the story from his perspective. When a year passes, his grandfather comes to live with his family, a quiet, sorrowful man who never talks with Bryce about anything. One day, however, he hands Bryce a major newspaper and asks him to tell him about his friend Julie. It seems like Julie got on the front page for doing an extremely noteworthy thing. She refused to come down from a sycamore tree in their neighborhood. Julie seems to particularly love that tree, and Bryce doesn't share her enthusiasm. This is the point of the story in which we first see Julie's father. He's standing outside of his house, painting as Stephen judges his entire being. Julie's father seems to be a low-paid dreamer, a combination that Bryce's family particularly dislikes. However, Bryce's family's dislike towards Julie's father is nothing compared to the degree of annoyance that Julie's everyday habit of climbing that sycamore tree elicits in Bryce. We go back in time now and see him approaching a commotion beneath the tree. A few kids are gathered, and some men are threatening Julie in an attempt to make her come down. Julie is begging the kids to help her, but nobody steps forward. In the end, just before Bryce enters the school bus, he hears his name and asks for help. For a second, he thinks about it, but in the end, he still chooses school over Julie's supposed obsession. After a few days, his grandfather is asking him to invite Julie over. Julie is now completely changed since the sycamore trio she loved so much is now chopped off. Sometimes, Bryce feels an urge to go up to her and ask for forgiveness, but Julie, who is completely drawn into sorrow, clearly doesn't remember the feelings she has for Bryce, and the latter doesn't want to remind her of that at all. Here, we go back in time once more to look at all of it from Julie's perspective and see what the tree really meant for her. We catch her engaged in one of her favorite activities, watching her father paint. Richard, Julie's father, asks her a sudden question about Bryce. Clearly, the two have a very close relationship, since Julie doesn't go out of her way to try and hide anything. She mentions Bryce's eyes and his smile, which she particularly adores, and here is the moment when Richard says something that changes her whole perspective on things. A whole is not a mere sum of its details. A landscape isn't a collection of beams of light and some grass, just as Bryce isn't the sum of his eyes and cheeks. At this point, Julie doesn't fully understand the meaning behind Richard's words, but soon she will. One day, she climbs the sycamore tree to rescue a kite. The thing is stuck between branches that are sticking up the highest she has ever been. And when she reaches to take it, she sees the most beautiful landscape she has ever seen. Suddenly, she understands what her father meant, and this is the moment when the sycamore tree and this spot receive particular worth in Julie's world. One day, she's scoping the morning landscape, making mental notes when the people with chainsaws arrive at the foot of the tree. Julie refuses to come down, but her voice is broken, she is afraid, and seeing her fellow school kids puts a quick seed of hope in her heart. She almost feels a tide of relief when seeing Bryce. If nobody steps forward, surely Bryce will. She believes it so much that seeing him leave makes her cry her heart out. From Bryce's point of view, this moment included much less emotion and color, but now we see Julie sobbing up in the tree, asking for help, while all her friends, including Bryce, leave her behind. She refuses to come down still, until what looks like the whole world appears down in the street. Word goes back to her father then, and he rushes towards the tree to talk Julie into coming down. He manages to do so, and with this moment comes an episode full of giraffes in Julie's life. She loses interest in all things until one evening, Richard enters her room holding a canvas covered in cloth. At this point, Julie is slowly entering an emotional realm of mental avoidance and nihilism, but this course changes drastically when she sees Richard unveiling the painting of her favorite sycamore tree. She embraces her father firmly and smiles for the first time after the incident. From now on, the painting hangs on her wall and reminds her of Richard's words about a whole being more than a sum of its parts. Because the tree that is depicted on the painting is more than a tree, it stores a strong feeling, and Julie begins to wonder if she still feels the same about Bryce. Sometime before this incident, Bryce first encountered a strange scene of a snake devouring an egg. This little moment started a time in his life full of unusual nightmares, but for him, the true nightmare involving eggs starts when one day Julie Baker arrives at his door and hands out a small box full of eggs. Suddenly, Bryce remembers a time when Julie won a science fair with her hatching eggs. The gift is a simple compliment in Julie's mind, but Bryce's family takes it too seriously. That night, sitting around the dinner table, they became overly concerned about the fertility of the eggs. If they were fertile, a chick might fall off of them when they tried to cook them. This is why they ask Bryce to ask Julie whether she has a rooster on her small farm. And so, there starts a series of events full of deception and lies. Naturally, Bryce doesn't want to talk to Julie about it, so he and his friend decide to sneak behind Julie's backyard and observe the chickens. No rooster is visible, so that night Bryce informs his family that, after a conversation with Julie, he knew the eggs could not possibly be fertile. This doesn't mean, however, that he is willing to eat them. They are from Julie Baker, and naturally, Bryce wants nothing to do with them, so he convinces everybody that the farm of Julie is so muddy, and she takes care of her chickens so poorly that the eggs are probably not safe to eat. Stephen here decides that Bryce has to return the eggs to Julie, and to avoid a similar situation, he tells her that the Lasky family doesn't eat any eggs at all. Bryce agrees, but later, instead of talking to Julie and returning the eggs, he throws them in the trash, thinking that with this, everything will end. It only gets worse, though. Julie develops a habit of bringing them eggs, and her hens seem to lay them nonstop. Bryce is deep in the spiral of lies at this point. He takes the eggs from Julie and throws them away immediately. In this manner, he lies both to his family and to Julie. He knows he can just tell Julie that they do not want any eggs, but for some reason, he just cannot do it. Finally, he even starts wondering whether he's afraid of hurting Julie's feelings. If we go back in time and look at this part of the story from Julie's perspective, this is how it will start. His father gets her some fertile eggs for her science project one day. At first, she isn't so excited, but seeing a glimpse of light inside a shell changes her attitude completely. She has 6 eggs, and on the day of the fair, all 6 hatch. Naturally, she wins, and of course, it is a big deal. But the most important thing for Julie is her new chickens. She starts taking care of them and is extremely excited when she first sees them laying eggs. Soon, the family is drawing in eggs with no idea what to do with them. One neighbor expresses interest in seeing some of them regularly, but it is still not enough, so Julie decides to regularly take them to Lasky Amos. She notices nothing and thinks that Bryce particularly enjoys her new habit. He even waits at the door to be the first to say hi to her. But all of it changes 2 weeks after the sycamore tree is cut down. That day, after receiving the box full of eggs from Julie, Bryce offers her to start taking the bus again. He says that the place where the sycamore tree used to stand is well cleared out by now, and it will be all right for Julie to see it. When he closes the door, Julie turns around and feels a sudden tide of happiness rolling over her softly. Bryce wants her to take the bus with her every morning. He clearly misses her, and after all, why shouldn't she start taking the bus again? Still standing at his door, she ponders this for a while, until she takes a few steps and hears the door opening behind her. It is Bryce coming out to throw away trash. The box of eggs is sticking out from the top, so there is no way not to notice them. And Julie's heart is broken. Bryce tries to hide it first, then justify his actions by blaming Julie's filthy backyard and a possible salmonella. Finally, he says sorry, but Julie sees clearly that he doesn't mean the word he's saying, so she simply moves away. For the first time in her life, Julie stops giving attention to Bryce, but strangely, the latter doesn't feel any relief. It is quite the opposite, actually. Julie's constant reminders that he was a complete jerk haunt Bryce, and even though Julie doesn't even talk to him anymore, she's always present in his life. One day, the strangest thing happens. Bryce sees his grandfather, Chet, helping Julie in her front yard. The two are working while clearly having a lot of fun. For the entire duration of the day, Bryce cannot stop looking over there, until at night Chet comes into his room and tells him something that gives Bryce a slight glimpse of direction. He tells him about the importance of being honest. Honesty will surely give him immediate discomfort, but it will indubitably save him a lifetime of trouble. These words assure Bryce that he owes Julie a heartfelt, honest apology. It doesn't turn out to be that easy, though. A lot of failed attempts are required after Bryce finally manages to catch Julie in private and say that he's sorry. Julie's answer isn't entirely what he had hoped for, but after conversing with her, the egg story is finally left behind. The loop of deception is broken, and finally, Bryce can enjoy watching TV with his family. This time, however, his father decides to bring up the subject of Julie once more. He throws a couple of cynical remarks towards Chet, who clearly likes hanging out with Julie and helping her in her front yard. Stephen scolds Julie's father and their entire family, and this results in a heated argument. Julie reminds Chet of his late wife with her rich and fighting spirit, and seeing a soulless man like Stephen talk trash about her and her family enrages him. He says that Richard, Julie's father, has a brother who needs special care because of a mental disorder. He was born with an umbilical cord wrapped around his neck, and this resulted in a serious cognitive deficiency. These words upset Bryce's mother terribly for some reason. Suddenly, she starts crying and storms out of the living room. Bryce is taken aback. There was no apparent reason why his mother would get upset like that. He looks at Chet with eyes full of questions and gets the answer. It seems like he was born in the same exact way, but the doctors saved him in time. Chet offers him a walk outside then. The two talks about Julie until they reach the spot where the sycamore tree used to stand graciously. Bryce is surprised. For his entire life, he has been regarding Julie as a girl with no special character, and here he is walking with his grandfather, who regards her as one of the most interesting people. That night, Bryce is forced to take out the newspaper and read Julie's words describing the feeling of being up in the tree. For the first time in his life, Bryce feels a change in his stomach and realizes his world is turning upside down. If he fails to hang on to something solid, he will surely fall. Now, let's wind up and see what happened in Julie's family the night after she learned Bryce's little secret. The dinner table is warm and cozy as always, as Julie proposes to take care of their front yard. She says that she'll work on it on her own and is forced to say what Bryce told her about their filthy yard. There is a reason why this subject is sensitive to her family. To take care of his brother, Richard puts away a lot of money, leaving only a portion of his small income for his family. Because of that, they have to rent the house. The front yard isn't theirs. It is their landlord's responsibility to take care of it. Naturally, this life is not what Richard hoped for his family, and perhaps that is why he refuses to take care of anything that isn't his own by right. He still hopes that one day they will move out of here or be able to afford this house. On the other hand, Julie's mother wants what's best for her children. She sees Richard not saving up for Julie's college and spending money on his brother instead, and it bugs her a lot. As expected, Julie's proposal starts a heated argument in which she hears her parents yell at each other for the first time in her life. Right away, Richard tells Julie that it isn't her fault and promises that they'll work it out. That night, both her mother and her father came into her room. Richard tells her how much he loves his brother and how he promised his parents that he would take care of him no matter what, and her mother tells Julie how much she loves Richard and his kind heart. In the end, Julie is proud of her parents and the way they approach conflict. She decides to forget about Bryce and think that her working on her yard has nothing to do with him. But in the end, she still knows that isn't completely true. The next day, when she starts trimming the bushes, Chet comes up to her for the first time, introduces himself, and without formally offering help, gets to work by her side. They hit it off very quickly, and this moment serves as the starting point of their close friendship, during which Chet teaches Julie that some people are less than the sum of their parts. Julie starts observing her schoolmates afterwards and realizes that most of the people she knows fall into that category. The only person she hopes not to see in that category is Bryce. She has hoped that for almost her entire life, but when he comes up to her to apologize honestly, she realizes that unfortunately, Bryce isn't what she hoped for at all. He is too much less than the sum of his parts. One day, during breakfast, Bryce's mother says to her family that she is inviting bakers for a sit-down dinner. Stephen tries to object to it, but his wife's decision is unchanged. In the end, nobody can do anything about it. At this point, Bryce's feelings for Julie are already well developed, to the point that he finds it extremely hard to think about something else. Naturally, this dinner makes everything worse. That day at school, he finds himself staring at Julie in secret and decides to do something about it. The first option that pops into his head is sharing his feelings with his best friend. but the latter says something to him that enraged him terribly. He says that cognitive deficiency probably runs in Julie Baker's genes, and she cannot possibly be far from her uncle. Bryce is fuming in rage inside, but all that comes out of him are a few forceful words of approval, and the avoidance of further conversation. This is how his friendship ends, and he finds himself alone in the face of the strongest feeling he has ever felt. His family, just as his best friend would not approve of this feeling. Instead of bugging him, however, this realization gives him a sudden and very strange sense of meaning and relief. He likes Julie Baker, and it is all right. Now, let's rewind once more. One morning, Julie decides to finally determine what she feels about Bryce. She has had conflicting feelings about him lately, and this confusion is extremely tiring for her. In short, she wants to figure everything out and finally be free from that boy. Perhaps that is why she insists on going to her uncle's birthday that morning. At first, Richard is reluctant, but when he sees that his daughter really wants to go, he agrees to take her. Daniel, Richard's brother, who lives in a special facility, seems to be an awfully cheerful man. At first, he is scared of Julie, since he doesn't recognize her at all, but when he hears that she's his niece, he flips from happiness. That day, they go to eat some ice cream, and Julie manages to become friends with him. But the day continues on an extremely chaotic note. Daniel's ice cream falls apart, and this puts him in a sudden state of severe panic. Richard quickly tries to calm him down, but Daniel remains uncontrollable until Julie buys a new one for him. They make a complete mess out of the ice cream place, but Daniel forgets about it immediately. The day still ends on a peaceful note, and Julie is glad to have come. Now she knows her family better and accepts it fully. When they return home, Trina's mother tells them about the invitation from Lascas. Julie and Richard are not so enthusiastic about going, but they see how much Trina wants it, so they agree. The next day at school, all Julie is able to think about is her uncle, until reality interrupts. One of her classmates comes up to her and tells her that Bryce has been staring at her the entire day. This classmate is absolutely sure that he has a major crush on her, and to prove her point, she says that she saw him sneaking in the library with his best friend. She offers to go there stealthily and eavesdrop on their conversation. For sure, they must be talking about Julie. And so, this is how Julie hears how Bryce approves his best friend's terrible idea of Julie's uncle, and the senseless prejudice around it. She feels tired and disappointed, but with this disappointment comes a sense of relief too. Finally, her confusion is over. Now she knows for sure that she no longer likes Bryce Lasky. That night, after a long and frustrating preparation, Bryce goes downstairs to meet the Baker family. He is left alone with Julie. He says hi and gives her a compliment, but all he receives back is the truth. Julie immediately cuts to the chase and tells him what she heard today. She tells him shortly and decisively afterwards that she doesn't intend to ever speak to him again. Bryce is left speechless. Before they all sit around the table, Bryce manages to tell her the truth, but this truth assures Julie that Bryce is a coward. All in all, he is left suffering while sitting across from her on the dinner table. That night, he gets an opportunity to prove to Julie that he isn't a coward. Stephen, his father, brings up the subject of the sycamore tree on purpose, calling it an ugly tree, but instead of going against his father, Bryce stays quiet. Soon, the subject is changed, and Julie's two brothers start talking about their band. Here, Bryce's mother reveals the truth that nobody knew until now. Stephen used to play in a band once. He was a saxophone player. The Baker brothers are immediately fascinated by his persona, but Stephen assures them that nothing is left of the Stephen that once connected his life to art. This reminiscence fills him with sorrow. Even though he tries to hide it throughout the next few hours, it is still clear that the thought of his previous self is extremely painful for him. Before the Bakers leave, Julie comes up to Bryce and apologizes to him for being so angry. She leaves peacefully and with no particular grudge, and this fact is all the more painful for Bryce. That night, his father starts accusing the Baker brothers of thieving, and Bryce's sister, who's good friends with the boys, decides to stand up against him. Stephen gets infuriated. He slaps her, and this is the way the day ends for the Lasky family. Before going to sleep, Bryce realizes why Stephen got so excited. The thought of the Baker brothers and their pursuit of art reminds him of his cowardice. And so, now Bryce understands that, in this regard, he is like his father. He must fight this terrible personality trait. When we look at this dinner from the perspective of Julie Baker, we understand that she sees most of it in the same way as Bryce. She feels powerful and in control for the entire duration. But in the end, the anger towards the Lasky family, particularly towards Bryce, completely fades away. She apologizes to Bryce and spends the rest of the night feeling peaceful and grateful. The morning after dinner, one more terrible thing is dumped on Bryce. He discovers that he has been chosen to be a basket boy for the annual school fundraiser. His best friend tells him that two of the most popular girls at the school are going to fight over him, but this news doesn't mean a thing to Bryce. During the fundraiser, Bryce sees Julie in the crowd, holding some cash, and his heart is turned upside down. Will she bid on him? Or will she engage in a battle with two of the most popular girls in the school over Bryce? Or will she just bid on someone else? All Bryce can think of is Julie for the entire duration, until just before his turn, Julie bids on someone else. His entire body becomes numb to the point where he finds it hard to step forward when it is his turn. One of the girls bids $50 to have dinner with him. It is a sensation. Nobody has even spent that much money before, and Bryce should be feeling at least a glimpse of pride. But of course, an unusual pain is eating him from the inside. During lunchtime, he fails to concentrate on Sherry Stalls, the girl who spent $50 to have a date with him. All Bryce can think of is Julie and the way she is laughing with her own date. Suddenly, Bryce stands up as if he were possessed, goes over to Julie, and tries to kiss her. Julie moves away, of course, and storms out of the school out of embarrassment. Bryce runs after her, but Julie is in no mood to talk to him. After Bryce comes his best friend, who scolds Bryce for doing such a thing with Julie, the worst girl ever. This time, Bryce chooses not to suppress his anger and pushes him away. Their friendship is over for good. Bryce spends the rest of the day in desperate attempts to reach Julie, but the latter has locked herself up in her room and doesn't intend to speak with anyone at all. This is how this part of the story looks from her perspective. Bryce Lasky is once again forced into her thoughts when the list of this year's Basket Boys is put out. Before the day of the auction, she fights against the temptation to bid on him and finally decides not to take money to school. This way, there is no chance she slips into bidding on Bryce. But fate definitely has a different plan for her. On her way to school, she runs into a neighbor who buys eggs from her, and even though she tries to avoid it, she is given a lot of money to spend. When the boy named Eddie Trulock steps forward in front of the audience, nobody raises their voice to bid on him. A terrible silence falls, and suddenly, Julie finds herself raising her hand. She is left wondering about the reason behind her action. Was it pity for the fear of giving into the temptation of bidding on Bryce? Whatever the reason, she tries to give Eddie her full attention during the struggle, but to no success. Suddenly, she sees Bryce standing up and coming towards her. And then comes the moment she dreamed about for almost her entire life. Bryce Lasky is about to kiss her, but she doesn't want this to happen in this way. She feels a tide of anger and embarrassment and moves away to rush home as quickly as possible. Bryce tries to talk to her for a long time, but Julie is extremely hurt and confused. She wants to be left alone. Finally, after 2 days, Bryce seizes on his attempts to reach her. Time flies, and one day, Julie enters the room to read a book alongside Richard. When she sees Bryce digging a hole in her front yard, she jumps up from surprise and takes a few steps to make him stop. But Richard stops her. He says that Bryce is digging the grass in their front yard with his permission. Julie is taken aback. She looks over at Bryce, who leaves her area of sight for a moment and then comes back into it to answer all of Julie's questions about his sudden behavior. He's holding a young tree, and Julie needs less than a second to determine from the shame of the leaves that it is indeed a sycamore tree. A wide smile is stretched across her face then, and she exits her house to help him out. With this, the two of them plant the sycamore tree in Julie's front yard. This is the moment when the two stories merge. From now on, this is the true friendship between Julie Baker and Bryce Lasky.